Chomriapsuo. Hello everyone, Virginia Tat here, and I welcome you back to this VOKK TV series to rediscovering and preserving the Khmer Krom identity. Today, I would like to talk about a critical issue highlighting the struggle for human rights and recognition faced by the Khmer Krom community in the Mekong Delta. It all began on October 18, 2022, when the Special Rapporteurs wrote a joint accusation letter, JAL, to the Vietnamese government, shedding light on the human rights oppression against the Khmer Krom community. However, despite the gravity of the accusations, the Vietnamese government remained silent for 2 months, leaving the Khmer Krom community and their advocates uncertain. It was only when the JAL was publicly published on the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, OHCHR, website that some attention was drawn to this pressing issue. After 6 months of silence and mounting international pressure, a young Khmer Krom girl, Ms. Sokan Thia Mao, representing the Khmer Kampuchea Krom Federation, KKF, at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, UNPFII, took a courageous step. On April 19, 2023, during the interactive dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, she seized the opportunity to demand a response from Vietnam regarding the JAL. Finally, on May 10th, Vietnam broke its silence and responded to their accusations. However, their response brought disappointment and frustration. Vietnam denied all the allegations and failed to address the concerns that the Khmer Krom community and their advocates raised. Vietnam's denial of the Khmer Krom's right to be recognized as indigenous people and their subsequent right to exercise self-determination is of particular significance. I would like to focus on the denial of the Khmer Krom's right to be recognized as indigenous peoples and the impact that this has on their ability to exercise their fundamental right to self-determination. We will examine the implications of Vietnam's response, the importance of recognition, and the urgent need for a just and equitable resolution. As a member of the Human Rights Council, Vietnam holds a critical role in upholding and protecting the rights of all individuals within its borders. However, its response denies the existence of indigenous peoples and fails to recognize the Khmer Krom community as an indigenous group. This denial contradicts historical facts and violates the principles enshrined in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The Khmer Krom people have inhabited their ancestral land in the Mekong Delta for thousands of years, predating the arrival of Vietnamese settlers. They have a deep cultural heritage, distinct language, and religious practices intimately tied to their land. Vietnam's refusal to acknowledge this historical connection disregards the rights and cultural heritage of the Khmer Krom community. One of the fundamental rights recognized by the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is the right to self-determination. This right allows indigenous peoples to freely determine their political status and pursue economic, social, and cultural development. However, Vietnam's denial of the existence of indigenous peoples denies the Khmer Krom community the opportunity to exercise this fundamental right. By imposing its own perspective and denying the diversity of indigenous identities, Vietnam undermines the principles of self-identification and cultural autonomy, crucial for the well-being and preservation of indigenous communities. As a member of the Human Rights Council, Vietnam has an obligation to uphold and promote human rights, including the rights of indigenous peoples. However, its response to the joint accusation letter indicates a disregard for these responsibilities. Vietnam must engage in open dialogue, address the concerns raised by the Khmer Krom community, and take meaningful steps to protect their rights. The Khmer Krom community in the Mekong Delta meets the criteria outlined by the United Nations for recognition as indigenous people. They possess a distinct culture, language, and history tied through their ancestral land. Yet, Vietnam chooses to deny their existence as indigenous peoples, instead, labeling them as ethnic minorities. This tactical maneuver disregards the UN suggestion for recognizing indigenous peoples. It undermines the Khmer Krom's right to self-determination as enshrined in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The United Nations and the international community must take a firm stance against Vietnam's dismissive approach. As a member of the Human Rights Council, Vietnam has an obligation to address the issues faced by indigenous peoples within its borders, including the Khmer Krom community. The United Nations must hold Vietnam accountable for its failures to act in line with human and indigenous rights principles. I recommend that the United Nations and the international community, number one, criticize Vietnam's denial of the Khmer Krom community's right to be recognized as indigenous peoples. Emphasize the importance of respecting the self-identification of indigenous peoples and the need to acknowledge their distinct cultural, historical, and land rights. Number two, encourage Vietnam to match its policies and procedures with the guidelines provided by the UN for the recognition and defense of the rights of indigenous peoples. This entails taking action to protect their right to self-determination and ensuring they are involved in the decision-making processes that impact their lives and territories. Number three, support and amplify the voices of the Khmer Krom community and their advocates, such as the Khmer Krom Federation, KKF, in their efforts to secure recognition and justice. This can be done through diplomatic channels, engagement with relevant UN bodies, and raising awareness at international forums. Number four, collaborate with civil society organizations, human rights defenders, and indigenous rights advocates to build strong alliances and solidarity networks. By uniting our voices and resources, we can exert collective pressure on Vietnam and create meaningful change for the Khmer Krom community and other indigenous peoples facing similar challenges. Let us stand together in solidarity with the Khmer Krom community, affirm their status as indigenous peoples, and demand that Vietnam uphold its responsibilities as a member of the Human Rights Council. We can only protect their rights and contribute to a more just and inclusive world for all indigenous peoples through recognition, respect, and meaningful action. So, Makun, Chomrip Lia, thank you.